All right, welcome to your deep dive. You ready to explore some seriously cool science?
Always.
Today we're talking about how something as simple as cold exposure can have these huge impacts on your immune system, specifically when it comes to neuroinflammation.
Yeah. It's really fascinating stuff.
It is, and you sent us this study to take a look at,
I
right?
did, yep. Cold exposure protects from neuroinflammation through immunologic reprogramming.
Okay, cold exposure protects from neuroinflammation through immunologic reprogramming, and this is from Cell Metabolism back in 2021.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, this is absolutely packed with fascinating findings.
Yeah.
I mean, it really challenges how we think about the connection between like our environment and our internal defenses.
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
who would have thought that, taking a cold plunge or something, could potentially be like a secret weapon against inflammation?
Right. So this study used mice to kind of explore this connection.
Yeah.
And the results are, I mean, really kind of mind-blowing.
Yeah, they really are.
I mean, what's really interesting is that even short bursts of cold exposure, like a couple of days,
Yeah.
made a difference in how the mice responded to a condition called EAE.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, EAE, for our listener, is experimental autoimmune encephalomyelitis, basically a mouse stand-in for multiple sclerosis, or
Oh,
MS.
right.
So what happened when these mice, felt the chill?
Well, their EAE symptoms were significantly less severe. They had a delayed onset of symptoms. Their symptoms overall were milder, and they didn't experience as much weight loss, which is a common issue with EAE.
Okay, so we're seeing a clear link between cold and a reduction in neuroinflammation.
Yeah.
But the study dug deeper.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
They wanted to understand what was actually happening inside the body.
Exactly. So what they found was that cold exposure caused this noticeable change in the bone marrow, which is where, immune cells are made.
Right.
Specifically, it decreased a type of immune cell called Ly6G monocytes.
Okay.
And these monocytes are known to travel to the brain and spinal cord where they can trigger inflammation.
So fewer of these, like, troublemaker cells meant less inflammation in the nervous system.
Exactly.
That makes sense. But it gets even more interesting.
Right. It does.
They found that the remaining monocytes weren't quite the same after a cold spell.
Right. What they found was that they had a lower level of something called MHCII. And this is a molecule that's super important in how immune cells communicate with each other.
Okay.
And this is where T cells come in, another crucial player in the immune system.
Okay, so let's talk about these T cells. They're like the soldiers of the immune system, right?
Right, exactly.
They go in and fight the bad guys.
Yep. And their activation or priming depends on those MHCII molecules on the monocytes.
Okay.
So with lower MHCII, the T cells got a different message, a less inflammatory message.
So it's like the cold exposure dialed down the intensity of the immune response, making it less likely to attack the nervous system.
Exactly.
But there's another layer to this story, isn't there?
Yeah.
Something about energy trade-offs.
Yes. The researchers proposed this very interesting theory. They think that when your body is exposed to cold, it has to work hard to stay warm and uses up a lot of energy.
Mm-hmm.
This could mean that there's less energy available for other processes, like mounting a full-blown immune response.
So the body's like, okay, got to keep the lights on and the body warm. So we'll put that big immune reaction on hold for now.
Yeah, something like that.
Did they find evidence to support this theory?
They did. They found that even when these mice were dealing with EAE, they were still able to maintain a stable body temperature in the cold. So this suggests that the body was prioritizing staying warm over going, full throttle with the inflammatory response.
That's amazing. So even though the immune system is incredibly powerful, it's not always calling the shots. The body has to balance its resources.
Precisely, yeah. It's this constant balancing act. And this study reveals just how complex and interconnected these systems truly are.
Wow. I mean, this is already making me rethink my love of cozy blankets and warm rooms. But let's not jump to conclusions yet. We've got a lot more to unpack about this study, including how cold affects different parts of the body and other types of immune responses.
Exactly. Yeah, we'll delve into those details next. So we've seen how cold exposure impacts those Ly6J monocytes in the bone marrow. But the researchers didn't stop there.
Right.
They wanted to know if this effect was limited to, just the bone marrow or if it extended to the rest of the body.
That makes sense. I mean, the bone marrow is like the factory where immune cells are made.
Right.
But those cells travel all over, right?
Exactly. So they took a close look at the monocytes circulating in the bloodstream
Okay.
and found a similar pattern. Cold exposure lowered the expression of MHCII on these cells as well.
Let me make sure I understand this.
Yeah,
So we're saying that even the monocytes already out in the body, not just the new ones being made, were less likely to trigger a strong inflammatory response because of the cold.
that's right. And they saw this pattern not just in the context of EAE, but also in other models of inflammation, like when they introduced tumor cells that typically, ramp up monocyte activity.
Mm.
Even then, the cold seemed to have this calming effect.
Wow. It's like cold exposure is this universal dimmer switch for inflammation no matter what the trigger is. But wait, there's another piece of the puzzle here, right?
Yeah.
They wanted to make sure that the cold wasn't messing with the lymphatic system.
You're right, yeah, because the lymphatic system is like the superhighway for immune cells, so any disruption there
Right.
could skew the results. So to make sure that wasn't happening, they used a technique called FITC painting.
Okay.
Basically, they tracked how immune cells moved through the lymphatic system, and cold exposure didn't seem to change anything.
Okay, so that's a crucial control.
Yeah.
It means the changes they observed in the monocytes were really due to the cold itself, not some weird side effect.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got these chilled out monocytes. But what about the T cells?
Yeah.
Remember, they play a key role in EAE.
Right. They discovered that cold exposure actually impacted this critical stage called T cell priming. It's like when the T cells first encounter their target and get their, marching orders.
Right.
Imagine those T cells as recruits going through boot camp. The monocytes, with their lower MHCII levels, are like drill sergeants giving out, less intense training.
So because of the cold, the T cells were being trained to be less aggressive.
That's a great way to put it, yeah. They even did an experiment where they transferred EAE-specific T cells into mice that were either exposed to cold or kept at room temperature.
Okay.
The cold mice developed much milder EAE, showing that even when you give them those, attack-ready T cells, the cold exposure still provides protection.
This is also interconnected. But they didn't stop there, did they?
Yeah.
They wanted to really confirm the role of those monocytes and all of that.
Exactly. They used a couple of methods to deplete the monocytes in mice before inducing EAE. And guess what? Without those monocytes around, the T cells in the lymph nodes didn't produce any inflammatory cytokines, which are signals that amplify the immune response.
So no monocytes, no inflammatory signals, no out-of-control immune response. It really highlights how important those monocytes are in shaping the T cell response.
Precisely. And this all points to the idea that cold exposure isn't just suppressing the immune system, it's actually reprogramming it.
Wow.
It's changing how those T cells are trained and how they ultimately respond to a threat.
This is all so fascinating. But we're not done yet, are we? There's still the matter of that energy trade-off theory.
All right.
What happens with longer periods of cold exposure?
You're absolutely right. Let's delve into that next.
Okay, so we've seen how even these short bursts of cold can make a difference. But what happens when the body is exposed to cold for, longer periods? Does that energy trade-off we talked about become a problem?
Yeah, that's a great question. The researchers wanted to explore that too. So they exposed mice to cold for 3 weeks, both with and without inducing EAE. Remember that energy trade-off theory suggests that the body might prioritize staying warm over, fighting off inflammation.
Right, like maybe the immune system would get shortchanged if the body needed too much energy for warmth.
Right.
So what did they find? Did the prolonged cold affect how the mice with EAE fared?
Surprisingly, no. They found no difference in body temperature between the mice with EAE and those without, regardless of whether they were exposed to cold or not. So it seems like the body was able to handle both the energy demands of staying warm and dealing with the autoimmune challenge.
Wow, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
So even after weeks in the cold, the body didn't sacrifice its ability to regulate temperature, even with the immune system working overtime.
Yeah.
But how did they measure that energy use? It's not like they can just ask the mice how much energy they're burning.
Right, Of course not. They used a few different techniques. They measured oxygen consumption in the brown adipose tissue, which is like the body's internal furnace,
Okay.
and in other tissues that contribute to heat production.
So they were basically looking at how much fuel the body was using to stay warm.
Exactly.
And they didn't see any difference between the mice with EAE and those without.
Right. And they actually took it a step further. Using a sophisticated imaging technique called PETCT, this allowed them to visualize and quantify glucose uptake, basically where the energy was going in different tissues.
So it's like tracking the energy flow in real time.
Exactly. Yeah.
What did that show?
Well, the PETCT scans revealed something really interesting. While there was no difference in glucose uptake in the brown adipose tissue or muscles, there was a significant increase in glucose uptake in the lymph nodes of the cold-exposed mice with EAE.
Wait, so even though the body was using energy to stay warm, it was also making sure the lymph nodes, which are key for the immune response, had plenty of fuel.
That's right. Yeah, it seems like the body was, intelligently directing resources to where they were most needed, supporting both temperature regulation and the immune response. The energy trade-off theory holds up. Staying warm is a priority, but the immune system isn't being neglected in the process.
This is also mind-blowing. It's like our bodies are these incredibly complex machines with all these interconnected systems constantly adapting and making adjustments based on what's happening both inside and outside.
Absolutely. And this study really highlights how much we still have to learn about these connections. It challenges us to rethink our understanding of the immune system and how it interacts with the environment.
So where do we go from here? What are the bigger implications of all of this?
Well, this research opens up so many exciting avenues for exploration. Could we harness the power of cold to treat autoimmune diseases? Could we develop new therapies that target those Ly6 monocytes or influence T cell priming? These are all questions that, scientists are now eager to explore.
It's like this one study has opened up this whole new world of possibilities. It makes you wonder what other simple, natural things might have a profound impact on our health that we haven't even considered yet.
That's the beauty of scientific discovery. It always leads to more questions, more possibilities.
Well, this has certainly given me a lot to think about. And maybe it's time I finally take the plunge and try those cold showers everyone's talking about. Thanks for taking us on this incredible deep dive. It's amazing to think that something as simple as cold exposure could potentially have such a powerful impact. And for you listening, what other hidden connections between your environment and your health are waiting to be discovered? That's something to ponder. Thanks for joining us. And until next time, keep exploring.